Hi there everybody, my name is Kate and welcome to my channel, Trinergy Awakens Naturally. So it's 60 degrees in Colorado Springs, the 18th of December, so I have my door open. If you hear the cars going by, forgive me. Yeah, this is just an off the cuff. I'm going to have to go with it and run with it. So couple of things. First of all, tomorrow is the 19th and we are, right here with the 3-Eye Atlas. Anybody that's, working with that energy is, going to be receiving some real powerful downloads. Anybody that's not working with it is going to receive some powerful downloads. There's a lot going on. You can see the disruption on the planet. You can see the disruption in people's psyches, and you can see people that are being brought, to some pretty raw and real places within themselves and with other people. So not so much to comment on 3-Eye Atlas. I don't personally work with the Atlas, 3-Eye Atlas at all myself. However, the energetic downloads I've gotten about it, are consistent with what I see happening. And regardless of that, what I wanted to do is pull it into a more pedestrian understanding that getting into priorities, humans right now are being very severely pushed into places of real consideration of what their priorities are. And I was really brought into a very full frontal awareness of that recently whenever I visited someone in the hospital that is at the end of their life. And for a while they were kind of not really ready to acknowledge that, and really, I went all heroic measures, etc., and which is fine, having those kinds of discussions with people. And it's not my discussion to have with her. I just happen to be visiting, as a matter of course, and to do some energy work with her. However, it came up, I didn't know where they were in that process, but it came up that she's recently, decided that I've made peace with it and I'm okay with it. And as I was doing the energy work, she was talking, and that frequently happens when we do energy work, particularly with end-of-life stuff or with, terminal illness kind of things. I've found that when I work with people like that, a lot of their history will come up because it's part of the blockages that, have created some need for them to become very introspective in however they got there. And this particular woman, it just happens to be physical malady that did so. And she was talking about her family life and growing up and, coming to terms with, a subject that I'm not sure that how many humans can really be okay, truly okay with that. They can just get more okay with it. However, I've seen the gamut from people that just denied it right up until the very last breath that, I'm fine. And then others that were, looking me in the face and asking if I could offer some sort of redemption to them to, I'm just completely at peace with this. That's a pretty wide gamut. I'd say that most people, we want to hang on to our life, and, especially if we haven't been terribly self-reflective, or we haven't been terribly introspective, or we haven't been, terribly spiritually living our lives in a way that's super connected to, what we truly believe in, or religious, however we might get there, not meaning to disparage anybody's path. If we feel, kind of disconnected from something outside of us, or, that we believe in beyond the here and now, if we are disconnected from that and don't have a real, feeling of that, that can be quite terrifying. And so, as I said, the gamut of just watching in my work as a paramedic, I saw a lot of people that went on to glory, just as a matter of what was going on in their world. There wasn't much we could do. And so, it wasn't always a traumatic something. It was just sometimes that this is a hospice situation, and, I've been with family members, etc., and I've seen people that really didn't have that introspection even right up until the very end, that it was just in full frontal denial. And those people that really can have the conversation, this was the first time I've worked with someone that they were having the conversation of their own impending, death in such an open format, and talking about it in the way that seems appropriate. I've had some conversations with folks that were pretty clinical about, yep, that's the way that is, and like, okay, no heart involved, you're just going to keep this right up here in the head? Yes. Okay. All right. And this person actually was, she seemed very misty. She seemed very sad. She seemed, retrospective. And I said, well, how do you feel like you've made, peace, amends, or whatever work you might need to do, unfinished business, I think was the words that she used. I said, do you feel like that you've wrapped up all of your unfinished business with your family members, etc.? And she related a couple of instances of having done XYZ with this person and XYZ, and so yes, and she said, and now that I look back, I feel like I've led a really good life. I've been very, lucky. I've been very fortunate. And she was recounting, all of that she brought up first was the stuff that really didn't feel so great to her, that she didn't feel like she'd been, really greatly favored in those situations, and yet she was bringing it back around to, I've made peace with it, and I have so much to be grateful for. When I look back at my life, I don't have a life that's just riddled with, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, etc., etc. Even in the spaces where she admittedly said, that wasn't the greatest, and, I'm working through some things with some family members of stuff that needs to be said before I go, overall, I'm very grateful for the life that I've led. And it made me think as I left the hospital that, how many people can realistically consider their own ending? That's the first thing. Most of us just, we don't even think about it. We don't consider it all. And however, it's a very healthy practice, I think, and not to do it when we're faced with it, not to do it when we have a scare, or something like that, but to truly think about, if that was me, if I was lying right there, what would I have to say about my life? Could I look backwards and find all those spots in my history where I didn't really show up the way that I wish I had, other people didn't show up the way that I wish they had, and also make peace with that, as well as fold into, and I'm grateful for all the things that were really good about my life, for all the things that were, quite lovely, etc. How many people can do that, and what is our priority today based on the fact that we really can't do that, or that we won't do that introspection stuff? And it was really neat, because I do know this, I've known this woman for a while, and she's been not physically healthy the entire time. However, she's certainly been healthier when I first met her, and so it wasn't even part of her consideration. But and I wouldn't have considered necessarily that she was deeply pondering such stuff. I don't know, she was just living her life, and we're not friends. I just happen to know her, is it because I know the family? And so just coming to the understanding that even people that seem like they're not very deeply attached to the more intimate spaces inside themselves, when we're forced to that position and we choose to do that, she's making a difference and an impact in the people around her in finishing up what she called unfinished business. Her words, I had unfinished business with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and really making a conscious effort, regardless of how her outcome is. It doesn't look really great. However, miracles can happen, and who knows, by doing this inventory, perhaps that is the miracle, and she lives another 20 years. I have no idea. It's a miracle regardless, though, and I just stood in the presence of this person and thinking, wow, this is amazing. A year or two ago, I would have looked at this and not have imagined that was the depth of this particular person. Not to say that she's stupid or shallow necessarily, just that I didn't know her very well, and it just didn't seem, she seemed a little bit emotionally closed off and, unavailable to anything that was going to get too squishy. And I'm kind of a squishy person. However, I do try to, acknowledge when people are not very, interested in getting too intimate detail or too close, emotionally. I wanted to honor that, and didn't really press, and that's fine, because there's a lot of people, and I don't need to know what everybody's world is about. It's not about hugging the whole entire world. It's just I felt like I could feel a sense of something in her that just seemed unsettled. And so I was so glad that I had an opportunity, that I do have the opportunity to offer some energy healing to her, and to listen to her story and what she's talking about, whatever it was. I'm open to whatever it is that comes up in conversations when I'm doing that kind of work, because I know that it's sacred work and it's holy work, regardless of whether I understand it or not, or whether the person that's saying things is understanding it or not. There's divine fine work that's being done, that's bringing balance and healing forward for both of us, but I was so honored the fact that it's a miracle to me to see someone who had an appearance of being kind of emotionally closed off when we first met, and who was able to tell basically a stranger, she doesn't really know me, not really. I mean, she's a peripheral person to how I know the family, so, or I'm a peripheral person is probably more realistic to say, to how I know the family, and she was just so open and very tender and sweet and very honest about what she was going through, and what to be witness to that, to hold that and know that somebody standing at the precipice of their own finality and can hold that much dignity, class, and grace was, that was a lot, and I didn't know how to say that, when it happened, and I don't even know that she would truly need to hear that or, anything, but I didn't even know how to express it or how to process it when it was happening, and it's taken, a while to get to this point, that is what I have missed seeing in every other experience I've had of someone transitioning. Now, she's not right on the edge, she's, however long beforehand she is, and EMS, there were people that were eminently on their way out the door, and anybody else, had a little bit of time. However, I was there for the actual transition, and, she's the first person that I have ever spoken to that was that aware of themselves, aware of the work they felt like, in her words, unfinished business that needed to be done, the evaluation of her life. And as she was speaking in a couple of hours, she was speaking and moving through all of this, and with such dignity, and when she felt very sad and she said, I really regret that, or it wasn't easy, etc., it was just matter of fact. It wasn't I feel sorry for myself, or I hate that person, or any of that. It was just matter of fact that that's the way that was, and her behavior as well as other people, unpleasant stuff, and then being able to then also in the same breath say, despite all of that, I was always, I feel like I've always been very blessed, and had very good things happen despite those things. And it was really quite a beautiful experience to witness someone on the precipice of where she is, whether it happens tomorrow, today, or 20 years from now, is irrelevant. It's the fact that we're brought to this point of reality that you must consider this if you're going to. If you'd like to have any consideration about how this goes, now's a good time, because this is the time. And I can't tell you how confusing that experience has been in the past, with watching people that, attempting to say, hey, do you want to talk about before you go, forever? Do you want to talk about our relationship and, have any kind of closure with this? And what are you talking about? Just like, what? It's odd. And then others, I had a patient one time that he was a felon that I was transporting to the hospital, and he was absolutely on his way out the door while we were driving, while I was with him. And he had a pretty awful past, of course. He was in a state penitentiary, and he was not able to speak. He was very, very ill, and he probably did expire, shortly after we arrived at the hospital, but we had a long transport. And during that time, I could see in his eyes that he knew what was happening. He was aware of what was happening, and he wasn't able to really verbalize much, but he was asking with his eyes, can I be seen as somebody valuable or worthy? Or, is there any redemption or hope for me or something? I don't know. I felt that deep, punch right to my soul, watching those eyes and thinking, oh my gosh, I do understand what the need is for someone to feel like before they expire and let go of their body, if they're at this point of their reality and their understanding of themselves, that it would be cruel to not offer some sense of kindness or, whatever this man might need. And he didn't need me to forgive him. It wasn't that. It just seemed like he needed more to be witnessed as where he was and the honesty of what he was acknowledging about himself and how he felt about that transition impending. And, I felt like he was saying if I could do it all over again, I would change my mind and do things differently. And so those kinds of reviews can be quite enlightening, and we don't often always, have that opportunity, nor do we all want that opportunity. But what a blessing to be part of something that was more consciously chosen. That conversation let me know that this person is consciously choosing, to have that discussion with herself and with, people in her life that are relevant to her, and that she feels like she needs to finish up before she goes, because oftentimes we don't get that consideration from people, and we get left holding the bag to try to, figure out how we're going to heal and move on and forgive without the other side ever being a part of that. And that's tough, it can be quite tough. It's very possible, and it's very necessary, regardless of who shows up on the other side of the negotiation table. If no one shows up, it's still necessary work to be done. And I just love seeing the fact that this person, that if I'd have given a bet, a couple of years ago, I'd have said, no, that's not how that would go. If I had to, lay money on it, I was just so pleasantly and beautifully surprised that, we just never know what is behind the eyeballs of another person, or what their experience is, or what they're willing to do when they are faced, with the need to do a review. We have no idea how people would choose, and my angle is to choose based on what I've seen other people going through, is to live my life, that if I was lying there and it was me, what is it I want to be able to say about me to myself, not necessarily to anybody else. How do I feel about my life thus far? How do I feel about the places where I didn't choose very well? How do I feel about the places where other people didn't choose very well? And how do I feel about the places where, I was really on fire and doing what I felt really good about what I was doing? How does that all play out for me? And that's, one of the ways that I prioritize my life, not based on, my eulogy, based on how will I feel about me, how do I feel every day when I lie down at night and, tuck myself into bed. It's my head I'm laying down with, and I lay down with myself, everywhere I am, there I am. That how do I feel about this? And when the game is all over and, the last whistle blows, am I going to feel good about the way that I've played the game, and how I've treated my, playmates out here? Did I play fair? Did I play clean? Did I, play with good strategy? Did I play, with sportsmanship that's, respectful, etc.? Or did I play dirty? 8-8, 17-17 is 8-8. How did I play? And any place where I played all of those things, get right with it. Whatever I need to do to acknowledge where I really, that wasn't so cool. And make efforts out here, absolutely, if it's appropriate, where it's appropriate, and where it can be received as. And then in the places where I might be willing to diminish myself, to say, no, I really did do a great job there, etc. And just keep myself balanced, so that, none of us knows. None of us knows at all. When we lie down at night, it could be the last time. Most of us just assume we're going to wake up and be fine. However, we don't know. Our lives can change in a matter of, seconds. And I am living proof of that my life was severely compromised 10 or 12 years ago, being on life support and, being very sick. And I didn't know until I woke up and had a chance to recover from it how close I came, and, would come again with the wrap up of all of that 4 months later, and a bunch of surgeries and stuff, that, if this is the end, am I okay with this being the end the way that it is, or do I need to do some other things? And, that started changing my mind to how I live my life today. However, big, huge, profound changes came as a result of that, and I'm really couldn't be more grateful. I'm really grateful, absolutely infinitely grateful, that I had an opportunity to get up out of the hospital bed and live to, change my mind and actually do something about it in this body, this time, as opposed to, possibly getting to the other side and reincarnating, or whatever the story might be for you that you believe. I want to leave this one, with a flair and with righteous action, no matter what I do, even where I've behaved badly. Celebrate the places where I didn't, and make amends and make righteous movement where I haven't. So anyway, I hope that's beneficial to you in some way, and I hope you enjoy your day no matter what part of the day you're in. And remember to get within your skin, because you're divine. It's absolutely fine. It is life eternal, of course, and it's absolutely fine all of the time. And I hope that you can really enjoy yourself, and celebrate where you are really beautiful, and just shining through the way that you feel proud and good about yourself to do. And in those places where maybe you got a little scuffed and a little less than glorious, be okay with the fact that there's a way to fix that. There's a way to fix that, and we don't have to wait until the very end, nor do we have to wait until we're on the other side to do that. So take care of yourselves, as I said, and get within your skin, because you're divine, absolutely beautiful and gorgeous. Take care of yourself every single time. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you again next time. Goodbye, friends. Mwah.